All right, sellers, let's talk about customer centricity, because as we know, selling is just about building relationships. And on the topic of building relationships, one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen sellers make is what I call the every guy at the bar problem. Now, before I go too far, I should probably point out two things. First of all, I totally understand that I'm talking about a cliche here, and that every guy at the bar is entirely intended as satire and hyperbole. And second, I should probably point out that I met my future wife at church before I was old enough to set foot in a bar, so there goes my credibility. But indulge me for a moment, because after all, it doesn't have to be a guy or a bar. The same premise holds true regardless of gender or geography. So at one point or another, regardless of the setting, it's probably safe to say that we've all tried to shoot our shot. And I'd venture to guess that most of us have either been on the giving or the receiving end of some really bad shooting efforts, like Detroit Pistons bad. Now, it could be that your line just comes across as unoriginal. So you say something like, "Do you come here often?" or "You look familiar." Or maybe it's something more gimmicky like, "Hey, do you have a name, or should I just call you mine?" The problem is that the line only tells its target one thing, that you're looking for a date. Now let's apply that to your customer, because after all, our buyers are just people who want to feel heard, valued, and understood. And that's exactly what customer centricity is all about. It's about putting your customer first and understanding their needs, not just pushing your product. And if connecting with your customer at a more genuine level isn't enough to convince you, I should probably point out that customer-centric sellers see a 150% greater quota attainment on average than product-centric sellers. Now let's break down these 3 fundamental questions you need to answer if you're going to be a more customer-centric seller. Now, your first question deals with why buy anything. And in simple terms, this is all about qualification. See, we've all been taught in one way or another that qualification is about budget, authority, needs, and time frame. And the first question really digs into your customer's needs. So to address why buy anything, you might ask questions like, what promises have you made to your shareholders, to your customers, to your stakeholders? What's keeping you from meeting those promises? And then ultimately, what's the impact if you don't? Why buy anything is about uncovering the cost of inaction compared to your proposed cost of action. It's about finding customers who have a need that you can fill, selling to the ones who have a need, and then hopefully stopping your sales efforts when you know that the customer doesn't have a need. In our Discovery Planning Guidebook, we introduce a methodology that helps you to uncover your customer's needs, along with tips and a framework that's going to help you to respond to your customer's needs. And then finally, don't be every guy at the bar. If you know that they don't have a need, it's okay to just be friends. But don't spend precious sales cycles trying to convince them that they have a need. I should point out that trying to convince them that they have a need is different than uncovering unarticulated needs, because the latter is the best practice, but the former is killing your sales velocity. Now, your next question that you need to answer is why buy from me? And this one is all about differentiation. It also happens to be where our product-led sellers tend to set up camp. Now, if we're lucky enough to have a first mover advantage or a significant market leadership position, we might be able to get by on our differentiators alone. But most sellers don't have that luxury. Remember, your customer isn't buying your solution for what it does. They're buying your solution for what it does for them. And in that light, answering this question means understanding your customer's goals, their strategies, their challenges, their why buy anything, and then developing a customer-centric point of view that helps them to see a brighter future that only your solution can deliver. In our point of view workshops, we talk about the rhetorical structure of an effective point of view. And simply stated, your point of view should outline what you want the customer to believe, why you believe it, and how you're going to prove it. And this is especially important when you put together your differentiation. Your point of differentiation needs to be clear, specific to the customer's needs, and defensible. Now, when we as sellers practice genuine customer curiosity, when we seek to understand their needs and then come up with an empathetic and thoughtful response to how they might address those needs, we'll ultimately gain the access, the credibility, and the trust that we need to set our solution apart and earn our customers' business. Now, your last question is why buy now? And this one's all about inspiration. You've just built credibility through your differentiated vision. This last question applies to the hardest part of the post-qualification sales cycle, establishing a sense of urgency. And this isn't about pressuring your customer. As we mentioned earlier, it's about conveying the cost of inaction relative to your solution. It's about arguing why your executive buyer should prioritize your solution over other initiatives that compete internally for your customer's budget. Now, just like the other questions here, why buy now isn't a one and done question to be answered. As your deal cycle progresses and your customer relationships evolve, so too will your business case. Now, why buy now isn't just about creating a mutual action plan with your customer. It's about establishing a sense of urgency with each stakeholder in your sales process so that they'll want to advance your business case to the executive buyer. And you can only do that with a customer-centric point of view. Now, I've seen it time and again. Even the most seasoned sellers can fall into what I call the inside-out trap. Now, this happens when the seller is so convinced in their pitch, they're so convinced in their sales skills, they're so convinced in the talking points that they receive from product marketing that they don't ever really hear what the customer's saying. Now, as someone who's supported sellers across hundreds of sales cycles, one of the most common loss reasons I've heard from customers is that the seller didn't really understand their business or their unique needs. The seller didn't instill that sense of empathy that the customer desires. And likewise, as someone who's been on the receiving end of hundreds of sales pitches, from startups to industry leaders, I can also tell you this: many of your talking points sound exactly like your competitors. So remember, it's empathy that will keep you from sounding like every guy at the bar. So why is product-led selling a bad thing? Think about it from the customer's point of view. When you hear a sales pitch that's all about the company and all about the product, what do you hear? You hear, why buy anything? Well, because I want money. Why buy from me? Well, because that's how I get money. And why buy now? Because I want money now. Now, that's not going to inspire anyone to buy. It makes you sound like every guy at the bar. It makes you seem like you're more interested in the sale than creating mutual customer value. So remember, selling is about building relationships, not just pushing products. When you focus on understanding your customer, their needs, and their goals, you create a genuine connection that leads to trust and loyalty. It's not about convincing them, it's about helping them. And that is what makes customer centricity so powerful.